Hi, my name's Harvey Taylor and I'm going to take you through some Ericksonian language patterns. So, Milton Erickson was a legendary hypnotherapist in the United States, and many of the patterns he used are used today in not just hypnotherapy but throughout NLP and in many applications. So before we begin, let's just talk about what the purpose is. What's the point of using these patterns? Well, the simple main purpose of using these patterns is to bypass conscious resistance. People's unconscious minds go much faster than their conscious minds. And if you want to engage, then experiment with engaging at an unconscious level. The other main purpose is to make what you're selling, the ideas and concepts, the desired actions and outcomes which you're aiming to persuade people to buy into, to make them compelling, exciting, vivid and dynamic. Now, counter to what you might think consciously, few people are really persuaded by logical and rational arguments, especially not children who often lack the life experience upon which to buy into the basis of your apparently rational and logical arguments. Okay, so let's move on and talk a little bit about ethics and the ethical use of Ericksonian language patterns. So in this video, I'm going to take you through some of the key Ericksonian language patterns, and there are lots of practical ways in which you can use these patterns to increase your capacity to influence and engage people in any context. Please remember, however, that these patterns come from hypnosis originally, and that Milton Erickson's intention was to help people and not to sell them things that they don't really want. And I personally believe that our responsibilities towards other human beings still apply, whatever techniques we choose to apply. What this means is stick to the same ethical guidelines that you're required to stick to within your profession. It also means don't behave like an idiot. These patterns can be very powerful, very beneficial when used in an honest and well-practiced manner, which places your client's interests or your audience interests at the heart of your practice. However, if you attempt to use these patterns for personal gain at other people's expense, you may or may not succeed in the short term, but you will almost certainly find that you subsequently lose influence as people simply learn not to trust you. So just stop the video for a moment and make a note of what you think the key ethical boundaries are for you in utilizing these powerful influencing tools within your professional context. Okay, welcome back. So now I want to talk about well-formed outcomes. So what's the purpose in you applying these particular language patterns? So what are you hoping to achieve? For these language patterns to enhance your influence in any situation, you need to be working towards a well-formed outcome, a goal if you like. So, for example, if you're a teacher, your well-formed outcome might be that your students enter into a vividly fantasized experience of what it was like to be a sailor at the Battle of Trafalgar, or to develop superpowered vision so that they can witness the exchange of electrons within a chemical reaction. Or it may just be that you want them to actually complete their homework on time. If you're a leader in any context, you may want your followers to really experience your vision for the future of your organisation in all of its sensory richness, imagining vividly all the benefits that will accrue to them personally. And if you're a carer seeking to comfort someone in physical or mental pain, you may want to use these patterns to help someone distance themselves from their pain so that they can function more comfortably, or maybe access a wider range of choices about their care. Well-formed outcomes work best when they're stated positively. So you say what you want to happen, not what you don't want to happen. A good, well-formed outcome is also expressed in sensory terms. This means you think about what the outcome will look like, what it will sound like, what it will feel, and even taste or smell like. And although you're seeking to influence others, make sure that your well-formed outcome refers to you, that you own it. So, for example, you may want the students to finish that project on time, but your well-formed outcome will say something like, I will be so positive and motivated that students will find it almost impossible to resist my infectious enthusiasm. Finally, do a quick check to ensure that what you are proposing to do fits well within the wider environment within which you're operating. So not only do you need to be clear about your ethical boundaries, but also to take real account of anyone else who might be affected by this outcome as you work towards it. In NLP, those of you that are familiar with neuro-linguistic programming, you'll know that this is called an ecology check. So once again, stop the video for a few moments and draft a simple, well-formed outcome within a professional context that you operate within. Okay, so now we're ready to start practicing the Ericksonian patterns. So one of the most exciting and also sobering thoughts about these patterns comes from something Erickson himself once said. Every word you use has the potential to have an effect now and 20 years from now. Being precise is important when you're using these patterns, and it's a good discipline to get into. At the same time, you want the patterns to flow naturally and to feel good as you use them. The trick is practice, practice, practice. Some people like to write out these patterns, lots of different variations, lots of different examples of the same pattern. Some people like to record themselves saying these patterns over and over. And the more you watch and listen to this video, the more automatic these patterns will become. They become part of the way you naturally speak. So by listening and repeating these patterns, and by accessing as many examples of people using these patterns, you will, in your own time, begin to internalize and integrate these patterns into the way you influence others, in a way which seems natural and which is positive and ethical for you. So let's begin with a pattern referred to as causal links. These are links that combine a cause and an effect. So setting up a chain of cause and effect, starting with statements which are verifiable and then gradually extending the cause-effect statements into areas you want your subject to go along with, even though these subsequent statements may not actually be verifiable. So, you're sitting here and you can feel the chair beneath you. and it's 3:20 in the afternoon, and you can hear my voice, and you may also be aware of other sounds. And as you notice these sounds, no matter how slight, you may also begin to become aware of how easy it would be to close your eyes right now. Using "and" is the weakest form of causal link. It's one that no one is likely to argue with. So once you've made a few statements using these "and" links, you can progress, as in the example above, to the next level. And as you do so, you may even notice the introduction of the word "as" followed by the words "you may also." And as you begin to wonder what it would be like to close your eyes now, as you continue to be vaguely aware of other sounds, as you focus more and more on the sound of my voice, as the clock ticks on, somehow this makes you want to just close your eyes so that you can imagine, as you close your eyes now, imagine that you are already developing the capacity to see interactions at a much smaller level, at a molecular, even at a subatomic level. And as you begin to imagine what this might be like to be able to... And of course, as you repeat each of these examples out loud, so you may also notice that each one makes you want to learn more. So I hope you're getting the idea by now. So words and phrases like makes and persuades and forces you to, all of these words and phrases are stronger than and as you, and so you may also. So much so that what you will have noticed by now, I suspect, is that you start out simply stating facts and gradually increase the strength of your language as you shift effortlessly from what is true to what you want people to assume to be true. So, with causal links, you start where the subjects are, you state obvious facts, and then you lead your subjects where you want them to go. In neurolinguistic programming, you'll remember we call this process pacing and leading. But you knew that, didn't you? In fact, you can do this to such an extent that even where the starting point is negative, say the students are disengaged in a classroom, you pace their level of disengagement and then you gradually begin to lead. Okay, students, I know that some of you are not yet fully engaged with this topic, and I also know that you want to enjoy yourselves while you're here. And as you sit here and as you listen to me talking, so much so that if you want to close your eyes just for a few moments and begin to imagine what it is going to make you feel like when you begin to feel so much more involved, when you find a new way of making this more interesting, more exciting, more relevant. So write out the causal links you can spot in that last sequence now. And then we'll move on to a couple of other patterns using awareness predicates and maybe even a little mind reading. So here are the patterns again. Okay, so let's move on. awareness predicates. Let's start with a list of awareness predicates, and I've put these into a set of phrases. Some of these, by the way, use some of the additional patterns that we'll be referring to later. So an awareness predicate is a word which basically indicates that you have some knowledge, some consciousness, some awareness, some memory, some fantasy about a particular topic or issue or subject. So I know. You may be aware, and you can even do it using a negative. I don't know to what extent. As you begin to remember, perhaps you can imagine. As you may have considered, so too you can think about. However much you are already exploring. So you get the idea. All of these words in some way or another refer to the process of being aware, of being conscious of in one way or another. So the actual words are know, aware, don't know, remember, imagine, considered, think, exploring. In fact, any word which implies some kind of conscious or semi-conscious cognitive processing, although of course you may have already been processing all of these patterns at a much less conscious level. I wouldn't know to what extent you're already experimenting with these patterns, perhaps even outside of your own conscious awareness, if you can imagine doing that right now. One other thing you may have noticed is that as you think about these patterns, whether I say you may have spotted or you may not yet be aware that, either way, I'm encouraging you to think. I'm drawing your attention to whatever follows the awareness predicate, because your unconscious mind doesn't recognize negatives. So suggesting that you might not yet be actively evaluating these patterns is liable to lead you to do so right away, isn't it? Awareness predicates and the phrases they are embedded in are incredibly useful because they tend to just lead you into additional forms of artful vagueness, influencing patterns, which help you to simply get into the flow of using Ericksonian language patterns without too much conscious effort, if you can imagine that. So now you have explored causal links and awareness predicates. You may also begin to spot some of the other patterns that I'm using, almost coincidentally. I mean, I wouldn't want to presuppose that this is already happening, or would I? Tell you what, just because we can, let's have a think about presuppositions and also mind reading. Mind reading is simply the most direct way of using awareness predicates. I know that. This is one example of mind reading which I know you'll understand this immediately. You know what he's going to say. You can guess what's going to happen now. And these are examples of encouraging mind reading in others too. In a sense, you simply presuppose what is going to happen next, or what your subjects are going to focus on now. So let's go into presuppositions in a bit more detail. Presuppositions are incredibly useful when you use them in sequences, when you stack one presupposition upon another. Just using one on its own can be fairly transparent. It's actually very difficult to say anything without using a presupposition. For example, I'm presupposing right now that you know what it means to say something, and also that you know what a presupposition is. So when you become really adept at influencing and engaging others, it will in part be due to your very deliberate and artful use of presuppositions. And I don't know how many presuppositions you can spot in that particular sentence. It's also very powerful to stack presuppositions one on top of another, and you'll know how to do this already at some level. I don't know how you know how to, somehow, whether it is now or in a few moments' time, consciously or unconsciously, before you started to think about this, or once you have considered it for a while, once you've practiced spotting and using presuppositions. Perhaps it will be after you've completed the homework, or even as you do the homework now. So see how many you can dig out from that lot. In fact, there are so many ways to presuppose that when you start to presuppose the successful outcomes, which I know you have already begun to think about for your target audience, for your group of subjects, it's just a matter of time, or perhaps a matter of giving the appearance of choice, because whichever way you think about this now, consciously and deliberately, or at a more intuitive and less conscious level, either way, you're going to think and act upon all of these ideas sooner or later, whether you do it my way or another way. Whatever way, it is going to work for you. I'll let you spot all the presuppositions from now on, so you can relax, whether you've got it yet or you're still practicing. Either way, etc., etc., etc. Alright, so let's now move on to a very important aspect of the way in which you use these language patterns. So not so much another language pattern, but how you say the language patterns that you're actually employing. So let's call it tonal marking for now, although you will spot there are other ways of marking out keywords and phrases other than with the tone of your voice. By the time we're done, like the pace, for example, or the pitch, whether your intonation goes down at the end of the sentence or up, for example, even how you use your hands, the angle of your head, and many, many other ways. The art is to punctuate the word or phrase in such a way as to draw attention to it, at least to draw attention to it at a less than obviously conscious level, if you can make sense of that. I mean, if you want to turn a phrase into an embedded command, all you need to do is mark out the phrase, the suggestion, the embedded command tonally, and simply drop your voice at the end of the phrase. For more examples of tonal and analog marking, and for information on embedding commands and suggestions, go to part 2 of this video Prezi.